Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. What is the method overloading and method overhiding? Method overloading means have multiple methods with the same name but different parameters, and uh, and the method hiding means the derived class defines a method with the same name and same signature as the base class method. As comparison of method overloading, we marked the base class method as a virtual and derived class method as an override to re-implementation of the method. In this case of the method hiding, we have to use new keyword or without new keyword also it will work with uh, so the in the derived class method we can use or not it. If we use we can use, if we're not it will gives a warnings. So what are the constructor in explanation? What are the constructors and explain default and parameterized copy and static constructors. A constructor is a special method in a class that gets automatically invoked when an object of the class is created. So whenever the object is created, the automatically constructor will get called. So a constructor is a special method in a class that automatically invoked when an object of the class is created. It is primarily used to initialize the object's data members. So a constructor is a special method in a class that gets automatically invoked when an object of the class is created. It is primarily used to initialize the object's data members, and the constructor name will be the same as the class name. Constructor name will be the same as the class name. And key points. So same constructor name same as class name. A constructor must have the same name as the class name. No return type, not even void, automatically called when you use the new keyword to create an object. Can be overloaded. Multiple constructors with the different parameter list are allowed. Can be overloaded. Constructor can be overloaded. Multiple constructors with the different parameter list are allowed. And default constructor, and if you don't define any, C Sharp provides one automatically. So default constructor, if you don't define any constructor, so C Sharp provides one automatically. Used for initialization, commonly used to set the default values or inject dependencies. This constructor is used for initialization and commonly used to set default values or inject dependencies. Types of constructors in C Sharp. So C Sharp supports of five main types of constructor. One is a default, parameter, and copy constructor, and static constructor, and private constructor. So default constructor is a constructor that does not have any parameters. Default constructor is a constructor that does not have any parameters. It's mainly used to initialize an object with some default values. It is mainly used to initialize an object with some default values. If we don't define any constructor in our class, the compiler automatically provides a default one. If we don't define any constructor in our class, the compiler automatically provides a default one. For example, if I create a class employee, I don't add any constructor. Then when I create a new object or new employee, the system automatically calls the default constructor. But if we explicitly define our own default constructor, we can use it to set initial values or like assigning default names or ages to the object fields. So parameter constructor is a constructor that takes a parameters. A parameter constructor is a constructor that takes a parameters. It is used when we want to initialize an object with specific or custom values inside of the default ones. A parameter is constructor is a constructor that takes a parameters. It is used when we want to initialize an object with specific or custom values instead of default ones. For example, if I have a class student with the fields like a name and marks, I can create a parameterized constructor that accepts those values and assigns them when the object is created. So when we write a new student and Venu and 90, the parameterized constructor runs and sets the name to the Venu and marks to the 90. It helps in initializing the object dynamically with the different data instead of using the same default values for all. What is a copy constructor? Copy constructor, a constructor that creates a new object as a copy of an existing object. A constructor that creates a new object as a copy of an existing object. C Sharp does not provide a default copy constructor unlike C++. You can define it manually to duplicate an object. A constructor that creates a new object as a copy of an existing object. Okay, for example, I have a car object with a model and price. I can pass that object to the copy constructor to create another car object with the same model and price. So here I have created in a public class car. So public string model and public int price. So parameterized constructor, here you can see public car, string model and int price, and assign the model to model and price to the price. So here copy constructor is created an car object C and passed model C dot model and price C dot price. Passed the car object here. Yeah. Copy constructor, a constructor that creates a new object as a copy of an existing object. So static constructor. A static constructor is used to initialize the static members of the classes. A static constructor is used to initialize the static members of a class. Implicitly, it's private and there is no access modifier or private parameters are allowed. Static constructor is used to initialize the static members of the class, and it is implicitly it is a private and there is no access modifiers or parameters are allowed. A static constructor is used to initialize the static members of the class, and implicitly it's private and there is no access modifiers or parameters are allowed. So here you can see public class demo and so class program and static, no output. Why? Okay. Static constructor call, static method call. So remember this rule. Static constructor. So remember this rule. Static constructor runs automatically only once per a class and only when the class is used, object is created or class static member is accessed. So static constructor runs automatically only once per class and only when class is used, object is created or static members is accessed. So here you define the static constructor This is a static constructor. So when you are creating an object, right, that constructor will call only once. And private constructor. A private constructor is a constructor that has a private access modifier. So it's mainly used to restrict the creation of objects from outside of the class. In other words, you cannot create an object of that class using the new keyword from another class. So it's commonly used in a singleton design pattern where we only want one instance of a class throughout the application. And so instead of allowing multiple objects, the private constructor ensures that the instance is created only once inside the class itself, and then reused whenever needed. For example, I have a logger class with a private constructor and a static method like get instance that returns the same single object every time. Can a constructor be a private? Yes, a constructor be a private. We use private constructor when we want to restrict the object creation from outside of the class, and it's commonly used in a singleton pattern. So, where we allow only one instance of the class in the entire application. It's also used in a static classes and where we never create an object at all. And so basically private constructor helps control how and when objects are created. So what are the difference between static constructor and private constructor? So the main difference between the static constructor and private constructor prevents creating object from outside of the class, usually used in the singleton pattern. Static constructor, on other hand, is used to initialize the static data and is called automatically only once before the class is used the first time. Yeah. What is the delegate? What is the delegate? Delegate is a typeset. Delegate is a function pointer. Delegate is a typesafe function pointer. A delegate is used to hold the reference of a method and call that method dynamically. A delegate is used to hold the reference of a method and call that method dynamically. And the important thing is that the delegate cannot point only those methods that have the same return type and parameter list. So to call a delegate method, define a delegate using the delegate keyword. The syntax is access modifier and delegate return type is a type or void of type and delegate name and parameters list. Then create an instance of the delegate and pass a method name that matches the same name as a signature, and like delegate name and delegate and new delegate name and pass the method and which you wanted to pass, and call the delegate by passing the required parameter values so that internally method which is bound with delegate gets executed. Delegate and parameter values, for example, here you can see I have taken a delegate and delegate pass, and here I am passing the Venu, so it is the output is the Venu. Delegate name and method name should not be the same, and delegate cannot be defined in a method, and better to define delegate under the namespace because delegate is a class type. If we define a class, it will be the nested type, and you can create an object of delegate. And event is a C sharp special kind of delegate, is used for publisher subscriber communication. Event is used for publisher subscriber communication. An event is used for publisher subscriber communication. Publisher defines and raises the event. A publisher defines and raises the event, and subscriber listens and reacts to that event. Defines and raises the event, and listens and react to that event. Publisher defines and raises the event, and subscriber listens and reacts to that event. Events in a C sharps are built in built on top of the delegates. Events in a C sharp are built on top of the delegates. Events in a C sharp are of the delegate, built on top of the delegates. Commonly used in a UI apps and event-driven systems and .NET event handlers and message notifications. Okay, what are the delegates? What are the generic delegates? Generic delegate is like an action, function, and predict, or these are the built-in versions of normal delegates, and generic delegates are like action, function, and predict. So action points to the method that do not return a value. Action that points to a method that do not return a value. It is return type is void. That return type is void. It do not return any values. So action and parameter 1 and parameter type 2. So you can see action is a string, the method action string, and show name action action print name. So you can see here nothing is written. So this is an points to a method that do not return any value. Return type is void. Function is a built-in delegate type that represent a method which returns a value. Function is a built-in delegate that represent a method which returns a value. The the last type of the parameter in a function always represent the return type. The last type parameter in a function always represent the return type. The last type parameter in a function always represents the return type. So func in a syntax func and parameter type 1 and parameter type 2, and last one is a return type, like this. Func function integer and add integer and adding two values, right? Represent the return type. Predict is a built-in delegate in a C sharp that always takes one parameter and always return the boolean. Always takes one parameter and always return the boolean. Always taken a one parameter and always return a boolean. So predict t and the boolean method, like you can see, is positive integer and return the true or false. Program. This is a program. Predict is a built-in delegate in the C sharp. Predict is a built-in delegate in a C sharp, always takes in a one parameter and returns a boolean value, and it's commonly used for checking condition and filtering data. For example, checking if a number is even, string is long, and record meets a condition in a list, like that. So what are the generics in C sharp? What are the generics in C sharp? So generics are a way to create classes and methods or collections that can work with any data type and are also type safe. Generics are generics are way to create classes and methods. Generics are way to create classes and methods or collections that can work with any data type. So, and also type safe and also work with any data type. Generics are way to create classes, methods, or collections that can work with any data type. For example, if you use int or string, the compiler will catch the type errors at compiler time itself. So we have generic methods and generic classes and generic interfaces and generic collections and generic delegates and generic constraints. So when we say type safe, it means C# ensures that only correct data type is used. Mistakes or catch at compiler time. What are the generic methods? Generic methods are the methods that can work with any data type using the type parameter enclosed with the angular brackets. So generic methods are the method that can work with any data type using the type parameter. Generic methods are the methods that can work with any data type using a type parameter t enclosed with the angular bracket t. So for example, you have in a method that has a parameter type int. Example here you can see a plus b. Pass the values into the method like in add 5 comma 10, and now double pass the now I want to pass the double values like an add 5.1 and 10.1. So how will you do? If you will do it is an overload method. If you wanted to do, then you can overload the types like an integer and double a. Oh, so instead of writing like this, you can use the type generic types. So instead of writing the multiple methods for each data type, we can make the method generic using the type parameter. So public t add, and t is a return type, and t is a placeholder for the data type. Above code will help us to prevent the multiple methods for data types. And instead of overloading the same method for int, double, and float, we can write only one generic method that works for all. It makes code. It makes our code simple and reusable and type safe. What are the generic? What are the generic classes? Generic classes are classes that can work with any data type. Generic classes is a classes that can work with any data type. Generic classes is a classes that can be worked with any data type. Generic classes are declared using a class name. Class name followed by the type parameter. Generic classes are the classes that can work with any data type. The generic classes are declared using a class name followed by a type parameter t enclosed with the angular brackets. So which we can create an object of the same class with a different data types. So if you are creating an object of that class with the different data types, so if you are creating an object with an integer, and if your object created with a string, you can create that. Public class box type t and public t value. What are the collections? Collections are basically used to store and manage a group of related objects or elements in a memory. They are dynamic, which means the size can be grow and shrink at runtime, and they have built-in methods like add, remove, and I add, remove. Collections are basically used to store and manage the group of related objects or elements in a memory. They are dynamic, which means the size can grow and shrink at the runtime. They have built-in methods like an add and remove. What are the differences between generic and non-generic collections? So non-generic collections are under the system dot collection namespace. Non-generic collections under the system dot collection namespace, and non-generic collections under the system dot collections namespace. And non-generic collections are not type safe. They can store mixed data types such as integer, string, and double. Non-generic collection are not type safe. They can mix they can store the mixed data types such as integer, string, and double. Example include an array list and a hash table, queue, and stack. Non-generic collection stores everything as an object. Non-generic collection stores everything as an object. So if you add a value type like an integer, it's boxed to an object, and when you retrieve it, it gets unboxed. This causes an extra memory uses and slower the performance. So whenever you're using the non-generic collections, that if you're taking in a value, that value is converted to the object. It is value type to the converted to the object type. So it is boxed, and whenever you are retrieving that boxing box to the unboxing. So non-generic collection stores everything as an object. Array list and hash table, queue, or stack. These are the example. Stores the elements as an object. Generic collections are under the system.collection.generic namespace. Generic collections are type safe and work with a specific data type and define it compile time. And example includes list, dictionary, and queue and stack. Generic collections stores the elements in their actual data rather than as an objects. Generic collection stores the elements in their actual data type rather than store rather than as an object. This means no boxing or unboxing is needed for value types. This means no boxing or unboxing is needed for value types, which improves the performance and ensures the type safety. What is the value types and reference types in a C sharp? Value type stores directly on the stack memory, and example integer, float, and boolean and character struct and enum. When assigned, copies the data and two independent variable like that. Leaves per a for the scope is were defined and cannot contain null unless nullable. Faster access passed by value by default, and boxing converts a value type into an object. It is in a heap allocation, and unboxing converts them back to the value type. It's costly, and memory cleanup happens automatically when it goes out of the scope. So reference types are stored in a heap memory. Variable holds a reference address, and example class, interface, and delegate, and object and string. Arrays. Class, interface, delegate, and object, string, and arrays. These are the examples of the reference types. When assigned, only reference is copied shared object. Require garbage collection for cleanup, and can be null. Slower access than value types, and pass by reference by default, and needed explicit cloning to create in a deep copy, and garbage collector handles the memory releases. So what is a dispose and finalize method? Both are used to uh, use it for resource cleanup, and but at different levels. Dispose manually cleanups the I disposable interface, and finalize automatic cleanup by garbage collector before object distraction. Dispose called explicitly, and finalize is called implicitly by the garbage collector, and dispose releases the unmanaged resources immediately, and finalize acts as a backup of dispose isn't called, and finalize adds overhead, gets the object goes into the finalized queue. Garbage collection. So GC memory from the heap for unreachable objects runs automatically, no manual delete, and uses the generation GC1 and GC2 and GC0. especially triggered when a system memory is low or unexpectedly via gc.collect. GC root stack variables and static fields and CPU registers and untouchable objects ready for collections uses in a mark and sweep the algorithm and finalize the queue. What is the extension method? Extension method is allows you to add new methods to the existing classes without modifying them. Allows you to add new methods existing classes without uh, modifying them. And static class defined in a static class and must be a static method. Extension methods are the static class and static methods. So this before first parameter. Okay. Generation and garbage collection. So object in a memory categorized by age. Objects in a memory are categorized by age, generation 1 and generation 0 and generation 1 and generation 2. Newly allocated is short-lived objects and objects that survives one GC cycle and long-lived objects. Gen 2 is in a long-lived object. GC collects Gen 0 Gen 0 most often fast and objects promoted to the next gen if they survive collection and fewer collections better performance and large object go directly to the garbage large object heap and gc optimize memory by focusing on young generations and helps reduce the cpu cost by avoiding the full heap scans. Using statement, okay. Sealed class cannot be inherited and static class can be instantiated or inherited. Can create objects, cannot create an instances. Okay. When objects remain unreachable but unused, GC cannot collect because a reference still exists and common causes event handlers not unsubscribed, a static reference holding the large objects, unmanaged resources are not disposable, and intersect and intersect returns the common rows between the two result sets and combine the results of the both queries and removes the duplicates automatically and keeps the duplicates and slower and faster and select insert intersect and select union all select must be same order of the columns. Yeah.